Welcome. Welcome to the Bible Odyssey. Tonight's story is for the person who is done. Not quitting, done. The exhaustion that is deeper than tired. The empty that comes after a long season of giving what you had. Elijah sat under a tree and said, "It is enough. I have had enough." And God sent an angel, and the angel made him food and told him to sleep. That is tonight. Get comfortable. Let's begin. Let your eyes close, softly, without effort. Tonight, you are under the tree, not planning, not managing, not holding anything together or preparing for the next thing. Under the tree. The way Elijah was under the tree, not from failure, not from faithlessness, not from a collapse of the calling, from the complete expenditure of everything the recent season required. You showed up for what was asked of you. You gave what the mountain required. And now the energy is gone, and the road ahead is long, and the tree is what is here. The tree is not the wrong place to be. The tree is where the angel comes. Take a slow breath in and release it. Your shoulders, let them fall. Your jaw, unclench. Your whole body, give itself to the surface beneath you, the way Elijah gave himself to the ground under the juniper tree in the wilderness of the Negev. He did not fight the exhaustion. He did not perform a faith he did not have. He surrendered to the ground, and the ground held him. You are held. The surface beneath you is holding everything the exhaustion has produced. And someone is coming. Someone who is not going to tell you to get up and get back to work. Someone who is going to touch you gently and say, "Arise and eat." The food is already prepared. It was prepared before you woke up to ask for it. 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 1 through 18. Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done, and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them." Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. "I have had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. All at once an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank, and then lay down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." So he got up and ate and drank. Strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and spent the night. The Lord appears to Elijah, and the word of the Lord came to him. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He replied, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He replied, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." The Lord said to him, "Go back the way you came, and go to the desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael king over Aram. Also, anoint Jehu son of Nimshi king over Israel, and anoint Elisha son of Shaphat from Abel Meholah to succeed you as prophet. Jehu will put to death any who escape the sword of Hazael, and Elisha will put to death any who escape the sword of Jehu. Yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed down to Baal, and whose mouths have not kissed him." The day before the tree had been the most extraordinary day of Elijah's life. Mount Carmel, the ridge of Carmel running from the hills of Galilee down to the Mediterranean coast. The dramatic geography of northern Israel, where the ridge meets the sky and the Jezreel valley stretches away below and the sea glitters in the distance. Elijah stood on this mountain alone against 450 prophets of Baal, alone against the entire institutional religious apparatus of the kingdom of Israel under Ahab and Jezebel. The terms were his. The God who answers by fire, he is God. The prophets of Baal went first. They called from morning until noon. They danced around the altar. They cried louder. They cut themselves with swords and spears until their blood flowed. They prophesied until the evening sacrifice. There was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Elijah repaired the altar of the Lord that had been torn down. He dug a trench around it large enough to hold 4 gallons of water. He arranged the wood and the cut bull, and then he had 12 large jars of water poured over the offering and the wood, once, twice, a third time, until the water ran down around the altar and filled the trench. And then he prayed. One prayer, not the extended prayer of a man building theological momentum. One prayer, direct, specific, theologically precise. Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. The fire of the Lord fell. It burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, "The Lord, He is God, the Lord, He is God." The greatest single day in Elijah's prophetic ministry. The vindication, the fire, the people prostrate, the long drought ending, the sky darkening with clouds, the rain coming. And then Elijah ran 17 miles ahead of Ahab's chariot to Jezreel, in the strength of the Lord. 17 miles. After the fire and the prayer and the altar and the 450 and the cloud and the rain, Elijah ran 17 miles. And then Jezebel sent a messenger. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them." One sentence, one message from one woman. And Elijah, who had just called down fire from heaven, who had just run 17 miles ahead of a royal chariot, who had just seen the entire nation of Israel fall prostrate and cry, "The Lord is God," was afraid and ran for his life. This is the moment that most retellings of the Elijah story do not know what to do with. The dramatic fall, the prophet who called down fire running from a woman's threat, the inexplicable collapse of the person who had just demonstrated the most spectacular faith available to the human person. The traditional readings explain it as spiritual attack, as failure of nerve, as the inability of the flesh to sustain the heights of the spirit, as the inevitable crash that follows the mountaintop. What the text actually says is simpler and more honest than any of these explanations. He was afraid. He was a human being who had just given everything, physically, emotionally, spiritually, to the most demanding day of his life. He had spent every resource. He had run 17 miles after the spending, and then the threat arrived, and there was nothing left to meet it with. The depletion was the explanation, not faithlessness, exhaustion, not spiritual failure, the human body and the human spirit reaching the end of what they can sustain. He ran to Beersheba in Judah and left his servant there, and he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a juniper tree and sat down under it, and he prayed that he might die. "I have had enough, Lord. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." Hear that prayer slowly. I have had enough. Not, I have lost faith. Not, I reject the calling. Not, the God who answered by fire on Carmel is not real. I have had enough. The prayer of the person at the absolute limit of what a human being can sustain, who has given everything the mountain required, who has nothing left for the threat that arrived the morning after, who is sitting under a desert tree and saying the most honest thing available to them, "I have had enough." And then he lay down under the tree, and he slept. All at once an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." The touch, before any word, the specific, physical, gentle contact of the one who comes not to correct, but to tend. Not a shaking, not a command delivered from a distance, a touch, the touch that communicates before the words do. "I see that you are down. I am not here to tell you to be otherwise. I am here because I see you are down, and because the down condition has specific requirements, and I have come to provide them." He looked around, and there at his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. The bread was already there. This is the detail the exhausted person most needs to receive. The bread was already there when he woke up. The angel had not arrived, and then gone to gather ingredients, and then prepared the meal, and then woken Elijah when it was ready. The bread was baked when Elijah opened his eyes. The provision preceded the waking. The care arrived before the request, because the need was known before the needing was expressed. He ate and drank, and then lay down again. He ate, he lay down again, and the angel let him. This is perhaps the most gracious detail in the entire passage and the one most easily missed. Elijah ate the bread and drank the water and then lay down again. He did not get up and continue. He did not demonstrate the restoration of his energy by resuming the journey. He lay down again. And the angel did not stop him, did not say, "Now that you have eaten, get up," allowed the second sleep. The second sleep was not a concession to weakness. It was part of the prescription. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too great for you. Get up and eat, for the journey is too great for you. For the journey is too great for you. Not, for you are too weak for the journey. The journey is too great." The problem is not Elijah's inadequacy. The problem is the size of the road ahead relative to the current resources. And the solution is not a motivational address about what Elijah is capable of. The solution is the bread on the coals and the jar of water, the food that the body requires for the road that the road requires. Eat, rest. The journey will still be ahead when the eating and the resting are done. But the eating and the resting come first. He arose, he ate and drank, and he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mountain of God. 40 days and 40 nights. In the strength of the cake baked on coals and the jar of water provided under the juniper tree. The rest was not the avoidance of the journey. The rest was the preparation for it. Elijah came to Horeb, the mountain of God, and there he went into a cave and spent the night. And the word of the Lord came to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He replied, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too. I am the only one left." The specific interior condition of the person who has given everything and who, in the depletion of the giving, has arrived at the feeling that they are alone in the giving, that no one else sees what they see, or carries what they carry, or shows up the way they have shown up. The isolation that the exhaustion produces, the sense of being the last one standing, which is also the sense of being the one who has been standing longest and who is now sitting under the juniper tree because the standing is over. And then the Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." A great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a still small voice. A still small voice. The Hebrew is the sound of sheer silence, the thin sound, the barely there sound, the sound that is almost not a sound, not the wind that tears mountains apart, not the earthquake, not the fire, the voice that arrives after all the dramatic forms of the divine have passed through, and that is, somehow, more unmistakably the divine than any of the dramatic forms. The still small voice after the fire. And when Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. The cloak over the face, the same instinct as Moses, hiding his face at the burning bush. The recognition that what is here is too much to look at directly. And the voice said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" The same question as before, and then the same answer from Elijah. "I have been zealous. The Israelites have rejected the covenant. I am the only one left." And then God's response to the "I am the only one left." "Yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed down to Baal, and whose mouths have not kissed him." 7,000. You are not the only one. You have never been the only one. The depletion produced the feeling of being alone. The feeling was honest. It was what the depletion produced. But the feeling was not accurate. There were 7,000 who had not bowed. The isolation that the exhaustion told Elijah was real was not as complete as the exhaustion made it feel. And then, go back the way you came. The journey continues. But the journey continues in the strength of the cake on the coals, and in the company of the 7,000, and with the still small voice still audible. Elijah could not have heard the still small voice on Mount Carmel. On Mount Carmel he was in the fire, calling down the fire, standing in the noise and the drama and the physical and spiritual expenditure of the greatest day of his prophetic ministry. The still small voice does not compete with the fire. It arrives after the fire, after the wind and the earthquake and the drama have passed through. And the person who can hear the still small voice is the person who has rested. This is the connection between the juniper tree and Horeb that is easy to miss because the story moves so quickly past the tree toward the mountain. The tree was the preparation for the mountain. The cake on the coals and the jar of water and the 2 sleeps under the juniper tree were the preparation for the 40 days and 40 nights of the journey, and the wind and the earthquake and the fire and the still small voice at the mouth of the cave. Elijah could not have stood at the mouth of the cave and heard the still small voice if he had not slept under the tree. The resting was not the interruption of the ministry. The resting was the preparation for the next chapter of it. This is what the angel communicated in the second waking. Not, "The journey is long, grit your teeth and go." The journey is too great for you in the condition you are currently in. The bread is for the condition. The rest is for the condition. And in the strength of the bread and the rest, the journey becomes possible. You are under the tree right now, and the still small voice is waiting for you at the mountain. But the mountain requires the tree first. The Horeb requires the juniper. The 40 days require the cake on the coals, and the cake is already there, and the jar is already full, and the angel has already touched you. The juniper tree comes to the people who have given the most. This is the thing that needs to be said about Elijah's collapse that almost never gets said. The tree came after the mountain. The depletion came after the fire. The "I have had enough" came after the greatest single act of the prophetic ministry. The tree is not the evidence of a weak prophet. It is the evidence of a faithful one. The person who never goes to the mountain never experiences the tree. The tree is the cost of the Carmel. The collapse is the price of the fire. And the people who arrive at the tree are the people who gave what the mountain required. You have been to the mountain, perhaps recently. Perhaps the mountain was last month, the season that asked everything and received everything. The project completed at enormous cost. The crisis held together for everyone else, while the holder quietly ran out. The caring for the person who needed everything, while the carer's own reserves were silently depleted. The ministry, the vocation, the relationship, the season, whatever it was that required the fire and received it from you. And then Jezebel sent a message, not necessarily a death threat, the morning after message. The moment when the thing that was supposed to be resolved by the mountain arrives the next morning in a different form. The problem that the greatest effort of the season did not permanently solve. The enemy that regrouped. The challenge that was answered by the fire and that arrived again the next day in a less dramatic but equally real form. And there was nothing left to meet it with, because the mountain had taken everything. And you ran into the wilderness of whatever the wilderness is in your life. The withdrawal, the going quiet, the stopping of the functioning that had been at full capacity for so long that the stopping looks from outside like a collapse, and from inside it feels like the only available option. And you arrived at the tree, and you sat down under it, and perhaps you said or felt, even if the words were not spoken, "I have had enough." You are in good company. The greatest prophet of the Old Testament sat under exactly this kind of tree after exactly this kind of mountain, and what God sent was not a rebuke, not a correction, not the instruction to get up and get back to the work. An angel, with a cake on the coals and a jar of water and the instruction to sleep. He looked around, and there at his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. Not manna from heaven in the dramatic wilderness provision of the Exodus. A cake baked on coals, the most ordinary, most domestic, most completely earthly form of provision available. Someone had made a fire. Someone had mixed the flour and the water and shaped the dough and baked it on the coals. The provision was not spectacular. It was bread. It was water. The most basic things a depleted body requires. And it was already there. Before Elijah woke, before he asked, before he knew the provision was coming. The angel had prepared it before waking him, because the need was known before the needing was expressed. The provision preceded the waking. This is what the cake on the coals says about God's response to depletion. God does not wait for the depleted person to get their theology straight before feeding them. Does not wait for the despair to resolve before providing for the body. Does not require the prophet to be in a better spiritual condition before the angel comes. Does not require the "I have had enough" prayer to be replaced by something more theologically appropriate before the bread is baked. The angel came to the prophet exactly as he was, under the tree, exhausted, having prayed to die. And the first act was not correction. It was provision. The cake is already there. The jar is already full. Tonight, in this room, in this dark, in this lying down, the provision is already here. Not the resolution of every difficult thing, the sustenance for this night, the cake on the coals that the body requires to rest, and the rest requires to restore, and the restoration requires to make the next step possible. The next step does not have to be taken tonight. Tonight is the cake and the water. Tonight is the sleeping. That is enough. It has always been enough. The angel has already baked it. It is at your head right now. The juniper tree is alive in your life right now. The first is the pastor who has been giving the faith community everything the faith community requires for 11 years. 11 years of the mountain. Not one mountain, the sustained series of mountains that ministry produces. The counseling and the hospital visits and the sermons and the conflicts and the funerals and the difficult board meetings and the person at 2 a.m. in crisis and the person who left and wrote the email and the person who stayed and demanded more than was available to give. 11 years of showing up for each mountain with the specific completeness that pastoral ministry requires. And then last Sunday arrived. Nothing dramatic happened last Sunday. The service was fine. The sermon was adequate. The attendance was what the attendance has been. But last Sunday, something that had been thinning for months finally ran out. The specific interior resource that makes the ministry feel like ministry rather than like performance. The thing that made the showing up genuine rather than mechanical. Last Sunday, it was gone. He sat in his car in the church parking lot for 45 minutes after everyone else had left. Not praying, not planning, simply sitting. Under the juniper tree of the church parking lot on a Sunday afternoon, with the empty building behind him and the week ahead of him, and nothing left for either. I have had enough, not spoken, felt, the complete and honest feeling of the person who has given what the mountain required and has arrived at the tree. And the angel is coming, not with a program for sustainable ministry or a framework for pastoral self-care, with a cake on the coals, with a jar of water, with the touch that says, "I see you are down. The provision is here. Arise and eat." You do not have to plan the next sermon tonight. You do not have to have the resource that last Sunday ran out. Tonight is the cake and the water. And in the strength of the cake and the water, in the season it takes, in the provision of the rest, the journey will resume. The still small voice is waiting at Horeb. The 7,000 who have not bowed are still there. But none of that is tonight. Tonight is the tree, and the cake, and the water, and the sleeping. The second is the mother who has been strong for too long. Strong is the word everyone uses for her. She is the strong one. It was said at her mother's funeral, and at her daughter's cancer diagnosis, and in the year of the divorce, and in the financial crisis that followed the divorce. She is the strong one. She handles things. She shows up. She carries what needs to be carried and manages what needs to be managed and holds the family together in the way that the strong ones hold families together. She has been carrying the mountain for 23 years. Not one mountain, the accumulated series of mountains that the strong one carries across a family's life. And she has been strong for all of them. Genuinely strong, not performed strength. The actual resource was there, and she gave it each time. And then, this week, Jezebel sent a message. Not a death threat, the specific, ordinary, completely real new difficulty that arrived in the week after the most demanding season of the last several years. The additional thing, the one more thing that arrived when the one more thing should not have been possible because everything was already spent. And she ran into the wilderness of her bedroom at 9 p.m. with the door closed and the lights off and the phone face down and the specific, necessary withdrawal of the person who has nothing left and who needs the room to be dark and quiet. I have had enough. The strong one is allowed to say this. The strong one is allowed to be under the tree. And the angel comes to the strong one under the tree, just as the angel came to Elijah. The cake is already there. The jar is already full. Arise and eat. The family will still be there tomorrow. The mountain will still be there tomorrow. But the provision comes before the journey. And tonight's provision is the dark and the quiet and the sleeping and the cake on the coals of this one night's rest. The journey is too great for you in the condition you are currently in. The provision is for the condition. Eat, sleep. The mountain will be there when the strength has returned, and the strength will return. In the strength of the food the angel provides. The third is the person who went to the mountain and it did not go the way the mountain was supposed to go. Not the burnout after the victory, the exhaustion after the failure. The project that was given everything and did not succeed. The relationship that was entered completely and ended anyway. The faith that was brought to the hard season with the full expectation that the faith would matter and that found the season hard regardless. The fire that was called down and did not fall. Under the tree after the failed mountain is its own specific darkness. The tree after the victory is at least the tree after something real happened. The tree after the failure is the tree after everything given and nothing received. The fire called down and the sky empty. The prayer prayed and the silence that is not the silence of the bread being baked, the silence of the unanswered. I have had enough. I am no better than my ancestors. The specific, exhausted, post-failure comparison, measuring the current depleted self against a standard the depleted self cannot meet. And the angel comes, not with an explanation of why the fire did not fall, not with a theological framework for the unanswered prayer, not with the evidence that the failure was not really a failure, with a cake on the coals, with a jar of water, with the touch that says, I see you are down. Here is what the down requires. Arise and eat. The journey continues after the failed mountain too. Not immediately. In the strength of the provision, in the time it takes. And the still small voice is waiting at Horeb, even for the person who called down fire and heard nothing. Even now, even under this tree, the cake is already there. Here is what the story of Elijah under the juniper tree does in a life that receives it and keeps returning to it. It gives the depleted person permission to be depleted. The Christian tradition has not always known what to do with Elijah under the tree. It has sometimes been taught as a cautionary tale. Look what happens when the great prophet loses his nerve. Sometimes as a lesson in spiritual warfare, Jezebel's threat was an attack and Elijah failed the test. Sometimes as a therapeutic case study, look how God addressed Elijah's depression with rest and nutrition. The text teaches none of these things. The text shows God sending an angel with food and the instruction to sleep. The text treats the I have had enough not as a failure, but as a condition requiring provision. The depletion is not corrected, it is fed. The despair is not rebuked, it is tended. The sleeping is not ended by a command to rise, it is given a second sleep. And the reason given for the second waking is not, the work is not done, stop resting. The reason given is, the journey is too great for you. The provision is for the journey. The journey will still be ahead when the provision has done its work. But the provision comes first. The person who returns to this story regularly, who brings their "I have had enough" to the image of Elijah under the tree, finds that the permission to be depleted slowly replaces the performance of fine. The managing of the exhaustion gives way to the receiving of the provision. The anxiety about the journey ahead gives way to the receiving of the bread that is at their head. You are allowed to be under the tree. The angel comes to the tree. The provision is at the tree. The touching happens at the tree. The still small voice is accessed from the tree. God does not wait for you to get back to the road before sending the angel. The angel comes to wherever you are lying down. The story also repairs the belief that the rest is wasted time. The person formed by the productivity culture receives from this story the specific, scriptural, completely authoritative declaration that the rest is the preparation. Elijah went 40 days in the strength of the food the angel provided. The cake on the coals under the juniper tree sustained 40 days of the next season of the ministry. The rest was not the avoidance of the journey. The rest was what made the journey possible. Tonight's sleep is not wasted time. Tonight's sleep is the provision for tomorrow's road. And the road requires the provision. The journey is too great for you in the condition you are currently in. The provision is for the condition. And in the strength of this provision, the cake on the coals, and the jar of water, and the sleep given, and the touch of the angel, the journey will be possible. It has always been possible. It will be possible tomorrow. But first, arise and eat, and sleep. The mountain of God is ahead, and the still small voice is waiting. And the 7,000 who have not bowed are already there. But none of that is tonight. Tonight is the tree. The story is alive right now. There is a woman who has been described as the strong one for so long that the description has become the cage. She was strong when the description was applied, genuinely strong, not performed. But the description has been applied so consistently across so many seasons that it has become the expectation. The strong one does not need the provision because the strong one provides. The strong one does not sit under the tree because the strong one is still on the road. The strong one handles things, and she is under the tree. Has been under the tree for 3 weeks, in the hidden way that the strong ones are under the tree, still showing up, still providing, still being the strong one for everyone who needs the strong one. And in the quiet of the house after everyone else is asleep, lying in the specific, bare, exhausted condition of the person who has been strong all day, and who has nothing left for the night. The angel is coming, in the form of this night, in the form of the provision of the dark and the quiet, and the permission to not be strong for one night, in the form of the bread that is already at her head, the sustenance that the angel prepared before she lay down, because the need was known before the needing was expressed. The strong one is allowed to be under the tree. The angel comes to the strong one. Arise and eat. The cake is there. The jar is full. Sleep. There is a man who felt nothing in church last Sunday. He has been in the faith for 19 years, has been to many mountains, seasons of genuine encounter, of the fire falling, of the faith alive and present and completely real. The retreats that transformed, the periods of deep prayer, the seasons when the word was living and active and the community was genuinely the body and the worship opened things that stayed open. And last Sunday he sat in the service and felt nothing, not hostility, not doubt, nothing. The songs produced no opening. The sermon landed without impact. He went through the motions with the effectless quality of someone performing something they no longer feel. He is under the tree, not apostate, depleted. The nothing he felt is not the evidence that the faith was never real. It is the evidence that the faith has been at the mountain long enough that the mountain has taken what the mountain takes. The dry season is the tree after the mountain. The performance of the worship that does not currently feel alive is the sitting under the juniper when there is nothing left. I have had enough. And the angel comes, not with a program for spiritual renewal, with the touch, with the arise and eat of this night, the dark, the quiet, the provision of the rest. And in the strength of this provision, the journey continues. The still small voice comes after the tree. The fire of the next season comes after the rest of this one. The 7,000 who have not bowed are still there. But none of that is tonight. Tonight is the tree, and the cake is at your head. Sleep. There is a teenager who ran from the mountain this week. The mountain was the performance, the music competition, the sports tryout, the academic presentation, the creative work submitted for judgment. Whatever it was, it took everything. The preparation took months. The showing up took everything the months had produced. And then it was done. And then the feedback arrived. And then the next thing was already on the horizon. And there was nothing left for the next thing. And they ran into the bedroom, into the headphones, into the specific withdrawal of the 17-year-old who has given everything and has nothing left for the world that keeps asking. I have had enough, not said, felt. And the angel comes, in the form of this night, in the form of the permission to be under the tree, in the cake on the coals of the rest that is available right now, the dark, the quiet, the body finally horizontal, the permission to stop. The journey is too great for you in the condition you are currently in. The provision is for the condition. Arise and eat. The cake is at your head. Sleep. And now, let everything grow very still. You are under the tree. Your own room, your own bed, your own dark, and the exhaustion of the mountain, whatever your mountain was, is in the body, in the shoulders that are finally falling, in the jaw that is finally unclenching, in the legs that are finally horizontal, and the mind that is finally in this room, being released from the management of the journey ahead. Let the mountain be received, whatever it was, the fire you called down, the work you did, the caring you provided, the showing up across the long season. The mountain was real, and the fire was real, and the expenditure was real, and the tree that came after it is the honest, physical, completely appropriate response of a person who gave everything the mountain required. You are not under the tree from failure. You are under the tree from faithfulness. The two look the same from the outside. God knows the difference. Let the prayer be received. I have had enough. The most honest prayer available to the person under the tree, not a crisis of faith, a declaration of condition, the condition of the person who has given everything and has reached the limit of what the human person can sustain. God received this prayer from Elijah without rebuke, without correction, without the requirement that the prayer be theologically improved before the bread is baked. Your version of the prayer is received the same way, without rebuke, without the requirement that you be in better condition before the provision comes. Let the angel's touch be received, the specific, physical, gentle contact of the one who comes not to correct, but to tend. The touch that says, I see you are down. The provision is here. Arise and eat. The touch is happening right now, in the warmth of the bed, in the weight of the body releasing, in the specific quality of a room that is holding you while the night does what the night does. The angel's touch is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is simply the bed, and the dark, and the permission to sleep. Let the provision be received. The cake already on the coals, the jar already full, already there when you woke up, having been prepared before you knew the preparation was coming. What you need for tonight is already here. Not the resolution of every difficult thing, the sustenance for this night, the rest that the body requires, and the morning requires, and the journey requires. The provision is here. It was here before you lay down. It will be here when you wake. Let the second sleep be given. Elijah ate and lay down again, and the angel let him. The second sleep was part of the provision. The rest was not a concession to weakness. It was the prescription. The journey is too great for you in the condition you are currently in. The provision is for the condition, and the condition requires the sleep. So sleep. It is the right thing. It is the prescribed thing. The mountain will be there. The still small voice will be at Horeb when you arrive. But none of that is tonight. Tonight is the tree, and the sleeping, and the cake on the coals, and the jar of water already full. Get up and eat, for the journey is too great for you. So he got up and ate and drank. Strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a still small voice. Sleep now. You are under the tree. The cake is on the coals. The jar is full. And the angel, who touched Elijah in the wilderness, who said, Arise and eat, who came a second time and said, The journey is too great for you, who prepared the bread before Elijah woke to ask for it, is here, in this room, under this tree, through the whole, long, provided night.